We're good? Okay. All right, now we're at Community Development Department budget. If we look at personnel, our budget for personnel was $283,673. We came in at $284,101. And FYE 15 is 287,310, so those numbers are all very close. Social Security, 16,435. Our estimated actual will be 17,583, and then again we'll go down to 16,578. I know we're going to have that discussion again, so we'll skip over it. When we get down to the subtotal numbers under benefits for this area, we're looking at 104,729 as our budget. We'll actually come in at 106,553, which is about a 2% increase. And for FYE 15, we're at 107,165. Operating costs, subtotal across the bottom is 56,609. Our estimated actual will actually be 44,850, and our budget will be 54,346. But if you go back up to liability insurance, we budgeted 46,568. We're probably going to be coming in at 38,000, and next year is 46,000. Mike, did you have anything?
I just had one comment, and actually it relates to even prior periods. Paul, I guess I'm going to ask you this question. With respect to the IMRF, I know we've got this projection going forward. A few years ago when the stock market really tanked, they underperformed significantly, and our rate was going to be increased rather significantly over the next several years. I assume that things have been improved now. Have we gotten this reflects the current rate that we've been notified of, I'm assuming, in your projections here? And what is...
Did I give that to you? Yes, it's the current rate for IMRF.
The current rate for the coming year?
For the coming year.
Okay, and that rate is currently about 60, I want to say 16%?
No, it was under 15%. I want to say it was like
14.83, is it? 14.83, yeah.
And have they given us a projection going forward at this point?
No.
Okay.
Well, Paul, that's a calendar year projection though, right?
Right, so we have to blend it in.
Yeah.
And how does that compare to last year?
About the same, because it's
Okay, that's encouraging. Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, under contractual, consulting, professional, reimbursable, our budget was 50,400. We came in at 80,000. Next year, FYE 15 is 48,400. So we're up in that area, but I think we already spoke about that, correct?
It's reimbursable.
Exactly.
Washes?
Total numbers across the bottom, 526,911 was our budget. Again, we're coming in at 547,004, and FYE 15 is going to come in at 532,138, so we're dropping back down. 20-4010 to 20-4135, salaries, overtime, Social Security, Medicare, IMRF, medical, life insurance, and supplemental pension. Operating 20-4205, boards and commissions, 1,500 for secretary. If we drop down 20-4213, APA membership 455. What is APA again?
It's for the planner?
Okay.
It's American Planning Association, right, Dan?
Yes.
20-4219, liability insurance 46,000. Liability insurance, we turn the page, it's broken down at 25,000, deductible 2,500, and legal expense at 18,500 for the total of 46,000. Anybody have any questions about that? Maintenance of vehicles, $1,200. Printing and forms, 20-4235, 2641. Postage of $1,500. Plat pages, 100. Forms, 250. Folders, 400. Business cards, 165. Go ahead.
Stopping at go back to the maintenance vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at, we're talking what, you and Mike, vehicles? I mean, how
Just
many vehicles?
myself, just my vehicle.
That's just your vehicle?
Yes.
I mean, we've got 1,200 budgeted this year. We're only at $222 actually.
And at this point, I'd have to double check with the mechanic. I know I've got, there's some issues with the tires at this point, so the tires need to be reviewed. I have not gotten this chance to definitely get that ironed out with Tom Masick.
I was curious too, Dan, that car is getting fairly old. How many miles do you have on that?
Almost 100,000.
Okay, so it is something probably in the near future.
Do we have anything to roll down to you?
Not at this point, no.
20-4253 supplies office, 450. Dropping down to 20-4263 training and education, staff and conference, $500. 20-4265 travel meetings, staff travel expense 100, staff local meeting expense 100. What do we use out of that, just out of curiosity?
And the travel?
Yeah.
The travel's, there's a show coming up again with the American Shopping Centers of America, which is, again, an economical development
Okay.
type of program at Navy Pier,
Gotcha.
for example.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's the spring one.
That's the
Is that the
there's
spring?
one that's out of state, and the one in Chicago is going to be better. There's one in May, and that one's in Vegas, which we
Okay,
decided
so
not
it's the
to
fall one.
attend.
Okay.
Correct.
We decided not to.
Right. And there's
Okay.
one more coming up. That's the fall, I believe it is, September.
Okay.
All right. 4267, nothing for telephone uniforms. Vehicle gas, $1,400. Again, we spoke about that. We don't know where we're going to be at on that. Contractual services, 20-4325, consulting professional services. Electrical inspections, 6793. Building and plumbing inspections, 21,423. Engineering, 3658. Contingency, 1,045. Marketing services is of $2,000. What's up with that?
Marketing services, again, is if we participate in the show, that we have literature telling potential businesses a little bit about Darien. It's a nice folder along with interesting facts, demographics about the city of Darien.
Is 2,000 too high on it, or is that a good number for it? Or
Pretty good number. I mean, the brochures or the folders that we do get are colored, have several different colors on them. They're done very nicely.
Last couple of years, we had this under 4328, and now it's at 4325.
Which number? All of them?
No, the marketing. Any reason for that, or?
4328 is reimbursable.
Right.
Unless it was just a typo earlier, but it's definitely not a reimbursable
Yeah, 'cause
expense.
I'm looking at the last 2 years' summaries, and it's got 4328 consulting professional reimbursable, marketing services.
That might, you know what that was? I believe that's when we had a consultant. We were looking at a consultant with the
right.
marketing for businesses. I'd have to double check on that.
I would know
But
it
if
says
it's-
Dan's marketing. But this is,
Yeah, it is. It last year's budget alone, it was under 4328.
Do you recycle any of your stuff for from the shows? So if you got all these folders, I mean, are you passing them all out, and are you bringing anything back that we could?
We do bring some back, but they do need to be updated. Some of the information does need to get updated. We're out. I think we have maybe about 4 or 5 left. I believe the last time we were at the show was 2 years ago, and I believe that we had close to 100 folders that we had basically brought down there. But I couldn't answer why that was in 4328. If it wasn't a reimbursable, it should not have been in the reimbursable.
Anybody got an issue with the 2,000?
So it's in the proper location now.
20-4328 consulting professional reimbursable. Again, it's all reimbursable, 48,400. Any questions on those section at all or not? Nope. Nothing for janitorial legal services. So that pretty much sets that apart. Okay, so we move to police department budget. Right off the bat, personnel. Salaries for officers, we budgeted $3,321,666. We're coming in at $32,19,460. So we drop there. However, our overtime is at budgeted at $460,750, and we're coming in at $530,468. But overall, that's been a drop of about $32,000 for the entire year. For the next year, we're anticipating a request of $4,227,983, which is approximately about $54,000 in increase. Overtime, out of that will be $461,300. If we go down to benefits, we take a look at IMRF, we're budgeting $74,146. We're gonna come in at that number. However, we're looking at 59,136 for the request for 15. Why is it
The
that-
actual? Is that the
actual
actual?
74?
No, I mean for 2015. Is that the right amount?
That's why I'm questioning it.
It uses the January 1st, 2015 IMRF calculation.
Medical life insurance, budgeted was 515,500. We're gonna come in at 430,000, and next year we're gonna go back up to 528,502. Any reason why it's such a big drop, or we still haven't gotten those final numbers? Scott,
Which line, Ted, I'm sorry?
we're looking under medical life insurance.
Those are based on the employees, so we have, that should be a very accurate calculation, just based on the number of employees we have. So we might have more single coverages than family coverages in the past year.
Okay.
Would be one reason that could drop or increase in a given
Well, we
year
were
if you have
down,
family
if you're
coverage.
down officers, the estimated actual will be lower. That's why it was at 430. But if you look at what we budgeted, you know, because we budget for the full allotment of the 34 officers.
Yeah.
My question relates more to next year. It's a
I was gonna-
23% increase. It's a $100,000 increase next year. Does that make sense with potentially?
From
what's in the-
515 to 528, Mike, are you saying, or?
Well, we're current year actual 430, we're projecting to almost 530 for next year.
I mean, really, if we're budgeting, and when we're budgeting, if we don't have an employee in that position, we're budgeting at a family health care insurance rate. So at $17,000 a year, you can make up a lot of money pretty quick.
But, I mean, are we down, what, 2 employees
Two.
even at
No, we're
17?
gonna be going back up to,
Well, we'll be at, I mean, I'm budgeting for 34, actually 34 employees plus one is on a duty disability that we also pay for. So it's actually, we're budgeting for 35.
But this year, we're at, what, 32 roughly? So, so even 3 at 17,000 still is something under $50,000.
You mean the year-to-date here now?
No.
There's an $85,000 difference between the budgeted amount and the estimated actual, and for 2 employees, that doesn't make any sense.
98,000.
And then going back up to 100,000 next year?
You also have the CSO that you lost, so that would add an additional person in the estimated actual.
Well, I think we'll have to look at the estimated actual number again. Possibly that's low.
And then how accurate it for 16 and 17 at 573 for 16 and then 622 for 17? Any idea, or?
How accurate we are for that?
Yeah.
What we do with that, the medical rate of inflation is 9.3%. So
Okay.
until we have realistic numbers, we budgeted at the 10%. So you do see heavy increases in those. We hope for good news like we got this year, but we
Oh.
can't anticipate that.
Okay, that answers that. I'm used, so 10%. Okay, thank you. All right, so if we go down to police pension, our budget was 1,115,282. Our actual for 14 is 1,126,572. And I know we approved 1,196,027, so it's an increase of 70. But again, 1291,709 for FYE 16, and then 1395,046. So 1,395,046 versus where we're at right now. How much of an increase in 2 years?
those are based on actuarial numbers.
Correct.
The only real number is the 1,196,000. The rest will depend on actuary. And
Right.
again, this year's performance looks pretty good in the market, but what next year's is going to be.
Okay. All right. All right. Subtotal across the bottom. Budgeted was 1,829,553. Came in at 1,754,543, and our request for FYE 15 is 1,913,548. As we go down under operating costs, boards and commissions. Actual this year and budgeted is 6,500. We're looking to go to 27,000 for next year
That's the testing,
for sergeants. Okay.
For sergeants and police officers.
right?
All right, liability insurance, budget is 219, we're coming in at 202, and request for next year is 228, up to 28,000. Maintenance of vehicle, 30,800. We're coming in at 42,000. We're requesting 66,200 for next year.
Age of the cars, is that what you're anticipating there, Scott?
Is it the K-9?
Is that the K-9 car?
No.
No, that's under equipment.
That's maintenance vehicles.
We're still reviewing, we have to go back in because we think some of those, that vehicle maintenance was for cars that were damaged in accidents.
Okay,
So we're still reviewing that line.
that number,
Yes.
okay.
Do we know what our actual is currently?
The maintenance equipment,
No.
Maintenance
Maintenance
vehicles.
vehicles.
maintenance vehicle,
Let's see here, okay. Let me see if I can,
$35,000.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, as we go down to training and education, we budgeted 31,410. Right now, we're running at 20,000, and next year we're requesting $36,037. Uniforms, 36,100 is our budget. We're going to come in at that, and then next year we're going to go up to 50,820. We'll get more into details as we go down. Vehicle, gas, and oil, budgeted 136. We're coming in at 110. Next year we're anticipating 130, and again, we're not sure where those numbers are going to be at. So, subtotal for that section 768 is our budget. We're coming in at 719,985, and next year we're requesting 838,000. Contractual, budgeted 385,303. That's what we're going to end up coming in at. And next year we're anticipating a $4,000 decrease to 381,168. And then finally down to capital. This year we're running at 8,800 for a budget. We're estimating that we're going to come in at $8,800, but we're requesting 145,399. Go ahead, please, Michael.
Just, again, a couple overall comments on a couple of these accounts. Again, comparing the year-to-date, the auxiliary police, we're projecting 7,000. We're currently at $300 through January. I don't know if we buy a lot of stuff at the end. The investigations and equipment, we're currently at 36,000, projecting 57,000. Maintenance equipment, talked about that before, but again, similarly, we're at 6,500 versus 15,400 projected. Telephone, we discussed before, we're at 7,400 versus 12,700 projected. And lastly, the equipment, we're projecting 8,800. We're at $2,800 through January. I don't know if we have any other equipment purchases coming between now and the end of the year.
We do, and we had budgeted last year for chairs and tables, and we have not made those purchases yet.
Thank you.
So are you guys gonna tighten up those numbers in the police department, some of those line items? Or are we gonna just roll with?
The vehicle maintenance, we are going to take a closer look at.
Okay. What's the age of the cars now? We're close to the end of the lease?
We have one more payment on the lease. I think it's $154,000. But we have some cars that are currently administrative vehicles that are pretty much long on the tooth.
Yeah.
2005, 2006, 2007, things like that. And road miles like that, in 2006, the car's pretty much beat up. And that's one of the reasons why it costs so much to get one repaired. And so we're looking at replacing
Okay.
gradually those.
How many vehicles would that be, Chief?
About eight or nine.
All right. Any other questions on these numbers at all? All right. 40-4010 salaries for civilians, 427,052. 5 civilians is 277,000. 3 part-time CSOs, 59,000. Admin secretary, 56,000. 1 part-time clerk, 22. Merit, 12,250 to get to the 427,052. The salaries for the officers. Union salaries for 32 officers is $2,893,050. Admin salaries for 2 is $256,166. Holiday pay $99,416. OIC $6,000. Outside detail $40,000, and holiday week work bonus is $45,000 for the total of $3,339,631.
Ted, can I stop you right there for a second?
Please.
Brian, I never asked you this question. I believe our police union contract is up this year. Does this increase in here reflect anything, just a normal escalation? Nothing at this point?
We could talk a little bit about that later, maybe, Mike. I mean, we have not yet talked to the council. We have not started negotiations, so we'll still need to talk about that.
Ted, I have a question.
Go ahead.
On the outside detail, last year we budgeted 77,000. This year we're budgeting 40,000. Is that reflective of what we're spending this year, or is it just a change in using outside detail?
The outside details are reimbursable, but
Okay.
we've had some of the details aren't filled because the officers simply aren't interested in working some of the details.
Okay.
What about the merit? It's 12,250 this year, and last year it was 2,250. There's a $10,000 difference.
Yes, that was the recent contract that we signed with the records group, so that
Can't hear you, Scott.
we recently signed a contract with the records group. That amount accounts for that agreement.
Okay.
Scott, was that in place of long, explain that more, otherwise it looks like it's
Took-
just,
took away
there was
the
some trade-off there.
Longevity.
So there was a trade-off between a number of benefits. So there were increased health insurance premiums. Longevity no longer exists, whereas it had previously. So we did add a merit evaluation program, which hadn't existed before. It was also a very good deal in terms of annual average salaries.
Joanne, also, last year, if you look at it, there was merit under salary civilians. We had merit of 2,250, longevity of 4,500.
Right.
And salaries officers, we had another 3,000 merit. So if you add all that together, we're just under 10,000, about 9,750 versus the 12,000. So
Okay.
it's not quite this alarming an
It just
increase.
looks odd because of the,
I agree the way it's
Okay.
been repositioned.
right.
Anything else, sir? 40-4030 overtime, 461,300. Our overtime so far is 220,000 out of that. Darien Fest is 14,500. 4th of July parade is 5,200. Comp sell back is 210,000. And then K9 fix overtime is 11,600. Comp sell back, how accurate is the 210,000?
That's a calculation based on everybody, all of the officers cashing out their comp down.
Okay.
I have a question. I'm sorry. Looks like estimated actual for 2014 is going to be 530 when we budgeted 460.
On which item?
I'm sorry, on the overtime.
Oh, okay.
And we're again budgeting 460.
Look, last year, 2013, during the meatiest part of the year, the most busy part of the year, we had 7 officers who were unavailable for duty for either FMLA or various other injuries.
That's right.
And so that caused a huge spike in the overtime that we were simply just not able to catch up on.
Thanks.
As far as the K9 fixed overtime,
Sir.
we use our K9 with other other municipalities around here. Is that part of? Do we calculate that? Do we anticipate?
The fixed overtime is what he's entitled to because he has to spend extra time with the dog and taking the dog to and from the vet. More often than not, we will authorize overtime, additional overtime for a call out, but we try to keep that to a minimum. If somebody calls, there are other dogs in the area that we try to get them to call some of the other dogs that are actually on duty as opposed to calling. The only time we'll call our dog off duty is if we have a drug sniff or a money sniff. And the reason we do that is because our participation in the investigation increases the amount that we're eligible for in the event of a seizure.
Darien Fest, Brian, when are we going to talk about the proposal that the chamber brought forward on changing their refund to us? Did you want to bring that up at a particular time?
They gave a proposal this year to retroactively change the deal we had last year.
We told them no.
We told them no, and I have not received anything for next year, separate and above from that. I think the request that we received was for what they were going to pay us now.
I think you need to go back to Claire because I was under the impression that, or I was thinking that possibly they wanted us to include it in our budget discussions to see if we would accept their new proposal
Well,
going in this
I'll-
budget year.
Well, I'll ask her tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah. They gave us a proposal that would dramatically decrease the amount of funds they would give us in as a contribution for participating and covering our costs for Darien Fest. And we told them no because, as Brian just said, it was retroactive, and the city council had no knowledge of it. So that was
I think
that.
the agreement with the chamber was, it's based on if they make more profit, they'll reimburse us at a higher cost. And I don't have the numbers, but I think the math this year worked out to 7,000. I don't know, Mike, if you've seen
I think it was closer to 5,000, and it was like, this has got to be.
Well,
this is
that we'll get
ridiculous.
reimbursed 7, and I think when they gave us the new proposal, I want to say it was half.
Yes,
half of that.
That's right. That's right.
And we said no, but again, I'll have to ask Claire if she's requesting that going forward.
Well, we told her no because the city council hadn't looked at it and approved it.
Well, if they were interested, I think they should be here during this discussion tonight, but just for the benefit of the newer council members again. Joe, Ted, you probably remember this, but several years ago, the Darien Fest hardly made any money, and they would contribute back to us, since you can see what our police overtime, the police barricades, the overtime, it's a significant expense in our budget, and we were looking at getting reimbursed more. Well, they were showing us the numbers they were making. They were hardly making anything, and they would just throw us a token amount that was at their discretion, maybe $1,000 or $2,000. We didn't like that idea. There was some discussion of even discontinuing Darien Fest or having them fund
Our
all
contribution,
the out-of-pocket expenses for it. And the compromise we reached was a reimbursement deal where, again, as Brian indicated, the more they made, the higher our reimbursement. So I believe it was like up to 10%. This year, believe they made, I want to say, $35,000. And
They had a
wanted-
banner year this year,
They had
yeah.
a better year, so they were supposed to reimburse us $7,000. They came back after the fact and said, well, we really would only like to do $3,500. And then Brian, the mayor, I believe, went back and said, no, that's not appropriate. That's not what was discussed in the budget. We have this agreement. If you want to change the agreement, then the appropriate time is to come to the council at this point and try and renegotiate the agreement. But again,
Okay, so.
We'll check with Claire
yeah,
tomorrow and
approach
see if
Claire
what they're
and,
requesting.
Yeah.
What was our overtime cost for the police? Wasn't that closer to 18,000 at one time?
It was much higher than it is today.
I
It was
mean,
19.5.
we reduced that because of the way you utilized train and.
And
We
yes.
reallocated manpower and
That's what I thought.
did some different things.
That 14.5 is considerably lower than the figure
Yes.
I've seen in the past.
there's some additional costs with the barricade rental.
Right.
And there's a pole for the
He's got a
cameras.
camera, they've got a camera now watching what's going on at the
Total
carnival.
costs are probably closer to
Okay.
$18,000.
Also, I made a comment throughout this whole budget for the police that some of the items from last year's breakout were moved from discretionary to the regular maintenance. So I asked Brian about that, and he said that mostly it was just moved because there was no debate about it last year, and so we're going to be seeing a little bit of
Which
shifting-
items were,
shifting.
Well,
Well,
that was one of them,
that was
overtime for the
overtime.
Darien Fest. So
Oh,
there was
yeah,
a
yeah.
number of things Tina brought to my attention, and in hindsight, yes, some of those I should and will move back into discretionary.
So we can take a look at it again next week.
I don't know if you had a list of those, Tina, but there was probably 7 items or so.
About, yeah.
Okay. Tina, as we go through, do you want to bring those up?
Sure.
Okay. Benefits, 40-4110, Social Security, all the way down Medicare, IMRF, medical life insurance, police pension, supplemental pension, 48,000.
I see him now.
Okay. Operating animal control, $2,200, 40-4201, 40-4203, auxiliary police, vest, $1,200, base, 3,000. Yeah.
Question.
Sure.
The vests. I see later on in equipment purchase, we have requests to spend $4,000 on vests.
Those are safety vests, the reflective safety vests. And that came up in police committee hearing meeting last night, and the price per unit on those vests that we initially looked at is $70 per vest, It's an ANSI rating for a level 2 or level 3 vest for the for traffic direction. It's a statutory mandate that an officer or first responder who's directing traffic and traffic has to wear a certain caliber of vest. We are revisiting that to see if we can find a similarly qualified vest for less than $70 per unit.
But the vest under auxiliary is the bulletproof
the
vest.
That's
body,
bulletproof, okay.
Yeah.
body
All
armor
right.
for the
They're different
auxiliaries, yeah. And those run about $400 a
All right.
piece.
40-4205 boards and commissions, hiring 5,000, PO testing, FYE 5,500, training 1,000, incidentals 500, sergeant's test for fiscal year ending 15,000.
The basis for the test is we brought that to police committee as well. What happened is when we gave the test last year, we had 18 people sign up, and only 3 people of that 18 passed the exam. We promoted all 3 of those folks on the list. We exhausted the list, and we don't have any eligible candidates currently. And the police committee at that time directed us that rather than do a process that involved promoting people who had not successfully passed the initial test, that we should go back and give another test. And so that's the reason for the request. In addition to that, part of it is that the accountability model that we're moving towards now requires line authority sergeants as opposed to having an OIC try to manage the shift. So that's the reason why we think that having an actual ranked sergeant is an important component to the police service delivery model.
And Chief, originally we had talked, and you came up with an alternative that we would really do in-house.
Yes.
And would not have costed money, but again, it was a different testing criteria, and at least the police committee really recognized the sergeants that passed the test, really how much work they put into it, and felt like what we proposed was a lesser test. We didn't look at it like that, but that was what the feedback was, and we took that and listened to that.
Yes, sir.
Chief, I would expect that the same people that took the test last year and only 3 of them passed it, it would be the same people. They have to just study harder, or what if none of them pass it again this time?
That's certainly a possibility, but I think that what that first test did was give everybody a wake-up call, and I'm fairly committed, certain that everybody will be committed. We've talked to the testing vendor, and there are some pre-test overview that they're able to do that won't give away the test, but will maybe better prepare the officers. And so that's one of the possibilities for this test that we didn't have in the last one.
Chief, how accurate is the 15,000 then? Is that pretty fair?
That's pretty accurate. It's likely that we could come in less than that. A large part of it depends on how many people successfully complete the first portion and navigate through the assessment center, because the assessment portion of the test is a little more is where the expense really comes in, because what happens is we set scenarios, and then they have to have raters and for the scenarios.
And if I remember from the police committee meeting, when we budgeted 15,000 last time, it wasn't used because only 3 passed.
Exactly.
So,
exactly. So
hopefully more will pass
hopefully more will pass.
Well, I think you're right, Chief. I think it was a wake-up call for the officers that did take the test, and they suddenly realized that they have to study a whole lot harder.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Does anybody have a problem with the 15,000? No? Okay.
There's the training and associate line item for 1,000 was discretionary previously.
Do we know what that's for?
That's part of the hiring expenses that they have to have. The new candidates have health screenings and things, polygraphs and things like that.
Okay.
So that's clearly not discretionary.
What was the amount? I'm sorry.
1,000.
$1,000.
I'm sorry.
You
that-
had a
But Chief,
discretionary last year.
that under the boards and commissions, that's an amount that the appointed members of the commission, the 3 members, use for training. That's
okay.
a little bit different there. Yeah, that would be in the discretionary column.
Should we leave the 1,000 in? Or
I think it's
They-
necessary.
I
yes.
mean, that
Okay.
commission definitely has hands-on in the hiring process, the disciplinary process, a lot of things. And I believe they have an annual conference, Chief. Go ahead.
They do have an annual conference, and I do stand corrected. I apologize. The other issue is that there is a vacancy, and so that new candidate, when that candidate is seated, will have to be brought up to speed with some training or attendance at one or more conferences.
Okay.
The other item that's new this year is PO testing, fiscal year 15. I know we showed it last year that was coming up this year, but could you explain what that is?
That's testing for newly hired
officers.
police officers. The test is only good for 2 years, and we are currently hiring people off that list. But by the time we get to the midpoint of the year, it'll be time to renew that test.
Thank you.
Anything else in that section? 40-4213 dues and subscriptions, dues 2,050, subscriptions 1,600. Move on. 40-4217 investigation and equipment, 44,646. Right off the bat, we see range for 37,146.
Chief was you reduced that number. This is the
Yes.
previous number, but you were going to take how much off of that?
With $3,000 reduction to that number, one of the commitments that we made in buying the firearm simulator, that we'd save about $3,000 a year in ammunition, and it's likely we're looking at some additional changes, and we may save actually even more than that. But $3,000 a year for the first 3 years was one of the commitments that we made to offset the cost of the simulator.
Yeah, because you only budgeted 30,000 last year.
Right.
How much is that for bullets out of that?
The 34,000 figure, once the 3,000 adjustment is made, will be all for ammunition.
Okay.
We have 2 members committed to the SWAT team, and they fire a considerable amount of ammunition at the .223 ammunition. They do a lot more training, but we average about 100 rounds for each of our live fire shoots for each member of the department for each of the shoots. So
Okay.
we have 2 practice shoots and 1 qualification shoot. And then in the event that somebody does not qualify, they have to go back for remedial training, and so that could conceivably be another 100 rounds. So the other thing is that ammunition is more expensive during the course of the war. Ammunition is more expensive at all levels, and so we're taking some internal steps to look at standardizing the type of ammunition and the type of weapons we're carrying.
Okay.
So
I guess I just want to follow up on that so I can understand, because last year we budgeted 30,000, but based on the increased ammunition, you're asking for 37 minus the 3, which is saved by the simulator?
yes, sir.
Okay. And then what's the difference between the range expenditure in 4217 and the rent of equipment for 5,000 and 4243?
That's for outside range fees. We have to we don't have obviously we don't have a range, so we have to pay Oak Brook and Lamont PD for the use of their two ranges. Oak Brook is an indoor range, and I think they upped their fees slightly because they just remodeled their range, and Lamont is an outdoor range that we use as well.
Okay, so we're going to use the same amount of range time even though we have the simulator?
That's projected. We may, in fact, use less. We will certainly be using less time because we'll only be using two practice shoots instead of 4. So the range time will be less.
Okay, because I think last year we budgeted 4,000 for range fees, and this year we're budgeting 5,000.
There was a slight increase. I know Oak Brook increased our fees slightly. I'll check and find out what the increase was, but they remodeled their range, and so they increased theirs slightly.
It was 5. It was
Was it
5
5?
last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chief,
Oh, it
any-
was 5, I'm sorry. But could we theoretically bring down the 5,000 if we're going to not use the range as much since we have the simulator?
We could definitely theoretically bring it down because we'll be using the Oak Brook range one less time, and the Lamont range 1 less time.
Chief, do they charge per use per employee? Do you know offhand?
I'm not sure how that. I'd have to check on that.
Can we take a look at that? Because I think,
We probably
we
could,
paid
we'll
for the simulator for the
From the bills,
purpose
I
of
remember the
reducing these
employee,
costs.
It's the number of employees, like if it's
Okay.
2 they charge per employee.
Okay, we'll look at that, we should be able to reduce that.
Chief, have we seen qualifications? What's the status of qualifications since we've got the simulator? Are they up? Are they down? Or
We've just completed the training 2 weeks ago on the simulator. We had a member from TI come in and train all 7 of our range instructors. here, and so we've just completed it. We had to reconfigure where we were going to use it. We were going to use it in the EEOC room in the back. And when the instructor came in, he said it was too many windows and it would cause us to have to recalibrate it every time. So we moved up to the training room in the front. Public Works came in and mounted it on a permanent mount for us. He's in the process of mounting the speakers and everything now. So we're just about ready to go now.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else in there? Okay, batteries 500, evidence supplies 3,000, K9 food equipment 1,500, investigative services 2,000, leads online for 2,240.
Leads Online is a database that we're able to use. One of the particularly interesting and important components of it is the pawners component. We're able to identify who's pawning in DuPage County, and that's critical in light of the residential burglaries and burglaries to the motor vehicle. And so it's another investigative tool that our detectives and even our beat officers will be able to use in order to ferret out criminal conduct.
Is that an annual expenditure or is it a one-time software
It's an annual because it's a standing database that we don't control. So it's basically a member fee basically.
Chief, did you say that's Leeds? Like we currently are members of Leeds. Is this the same state?
That's a completely different.
This is actually
Leeds is the state relay. The way Leeds operates is it relays information between the Secretary of State and local police departments. This is a different standalone database.
Is it a one-time license, or do you have you're buying several licenses
No,
for several officers to go with?
Everybody's able to use it, but we have to renew it every year.
Okay, but the fee is probably based on if you having 34 officers who have access to it, they're probably basing the fee off of each individual officer, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Any issues with that, anybody? Okay. Prisoner needs 500.
That's for when we have somebody who's detained, food, sandwich, or things like that.
Gotcha.
The last meal?
No last meals, hopefully.
Pretty good last meal.
Classic, Tina. Classic.
A lot of peanut butter and jelly, right?
Back in the old day, Barney only had one bullet in his pocket.
Bread and water.
40-4219 liability insurance. Total in this section is 228,760, broken down by Irma at 158,760, legals 25,000, prosecution 18, first aid 5,000, fire extinguishers 2,000, wellness fairs 2,000, deductibles 15,000, and tow law judge 3,000.
Legal is anticipated to increase by $10,000. Well, I guess I don't know what the actual is this year for legal.
I don't have the breakdown. We have the total liability insurance account year to date is 177 versus 219, but the legal is incorporated in that number, so I don't have the breakdown between how much of that.
Last year we budgeted 15.
We increased it primarily with the union negotiations for the police officers coming up.
Okay. Operating 40-4223 maintenance building has been moved to municipal services. 40-4225 maintenance and equipment of $16,720. Right off the bat, I'm looking at vet K9 $2,000. Question that I have for you, Chief, does that include grooming, or is that is that just vet bills?
It's just basically vet bills. From time to time, he has to go in for a checkup. Because he's caged most of the time, he may have to have his nails clipped from time to time, et cetera.
Okay. Go ahead.
Last year we had the life scan service contract. Was that a one-time fee that's not going to renew?
No, actually, we will come to the end of the live scan contract, and in 2016 we'll probably be coming to the council requesting a new live scan machine, effective January of this year. LiveScan has a statutory mandate that the LiveScan machine prints be accompanied by photographs, and so our machine will be out of date. It's already an older machine, and our service contract, the one that you just spoke about, expires next year, and so we'll probably be seeking a replacement machine at that time.
Copier service, I'm looking at 3,500, which is the same as last year, yet in our equipment purchases, we're looking at replacing I believe we have 2 copiers there.
Yes.
And we're looking at replacing them both, and yet we have 3,500 for repairs in addition.
I spoke to Deputy Chief Cooper about that, and what he indicated is that's the repair contract, maintenance contract on the new machines.
The new machines.
On the new machines.
How long is that for?
I think it's a 2-year contract, if I'm not mistaken.
We don't have that option for the one for City Hall?
We do. We haven't selected to use the one for City Hall.
Do we know how much it is?
I have it in a file, but I don't have it on me.
Okay.
But it's, with the City Hall copier, specifically with that maintenance agreement, you're allowed a certain number of copies also, and every page afterwards.
Right.
You pay a certain, percentage, and we would have gone over pretty significantly on that also, just with our volume.
We talked about this at the police committee last night too, and I'm hoping that moving forward down the road, maybe 4 years, whatever the life expectancy of these is, that we communicate with one another, because we're about to buy copiers within basically 6 months of each other. That, if the City Hall's copiers on its way ready to purchase, then I'm hoping we can go to the other departments and say, hey, how's your copier? Because we need to buy one. We bought them, around the same time. So maybe we can buy 3 copiers at the same time and get a better rate than buying one here in August of 2013 and then coming budget time 2014 for the police department and buying 2 new ones. So hoping going forward we can kind of think about that moving forward.
In-car video maintenance, that's a new one.
That's for video maintenance for the in-car cameras, things that break down from time to time, microphones break, things like that.
How old are they now?
About a year old.
We're already having breakdowns.
Well, the microphones, because they're not under warranty. When we break a microphone, the officers are getting in and out of the cars with the microphones, things like that. So
This may be a little off topic, but wasn't there an issue with the vehicles syncing when they came back with the data?
there was initially, but we got that corrected early on. Pulling into the bays, they weren't syncing right, but they've all been corrected right now.
Thank you.
Do we have any numbers on that, what we used so far this year, or is this going to be the first time?
This will be the first time. I think they were under warranty, if I'm not mistaken, for the early part of
This
the
is
year.
the first time we've identified this as a line item.
What's that,
For the
in-car video?
Car
No,
video,
last
Last
no,
year we had
maintenance.
3,700.
3,700, I see it now.
Okay. Any other questions out of that section? 40-4229, maintenance of vehicles, car washes, $10,000. What is our fleet rate? Do we know for King? Any idea?
I think it's. Let me get back to the chair on that, because I'm not sure.
It's at $7 per wash.
Okay.
But I raised the question on this one. It was $7,800 last year, and typically our bill has been running $500 or less per month, which I would expect coming around 6,000, 7,000. I did ask Brian about that, and I believe you indicated that the chief was anticipating doing details or something on the
Yeah, I
vehicles
think,
since earlier this year. Or?
There was a
Detailing. There was a request to detail, especially with the newer vehicles. What we did is early on in the purchase of those vehicles, we set an extended date, a life date. Normally, the vehicles, police vehicles, are 3 to 5 years, and we're trying to stretch that into an 8-year period. And so we wanted the vehicles to be as nice. And so there's some other internal things that we're doing to extend the life, but that's the reason for that. So we wanted to detail the vehicles as well.
Yeah, I raised the question. I just wanted the rest of the council to be aware of the answer.
Okay. Repairs for 40,000 and tires for 10,000. Tires I can understand.
Repairs, I mean, if the vehicles are newer, that's a lot, 40,000.
That's on all the vehicles, though. We have about 12 vehicles that are not new, and so those vehicles are much older, and when they break down, it's usually a fairly extensive breakdown.
So
And we're working with
last
Dan
year, if we had
now.
budgeted 10,000, were there more older vehicles this year than last year?
Well, we had older vehicles, and as I indicated, some of that vehicle maintenance expense we believe to be covered with damage to the vehicles from accidents, where it was that expense was included in the vehicle maintenance as well.
So the year-to-date numbers we're looking through, and those will be reduced if we've received insurance payments back on those, we would reduce that line item.
Okay.
Currently, we're at about
Okay.
35,000 year-to-date versus the 30,800 we budgeted, so we're about $4,000 over budget already as of January, so
All right.
some increase does seem appropriate to recognize what's been happening this year, and they will be a year older next year.
Gotcha. Registration's 1,200. Radios, lights, and sirens, 5,000.
That's one thing because they're exposed to the elements. The filaments burn out, things
Okay.
like that. So and
Gotcha.
for a light bar or even the oscillating lights and the tail lights or the headlamps, it's usually fairly expensive to repair.
Okay. All right. As we move down, 40-4233, postage, mailings, 4,500. 40-4235, printing and forms, 5,000. And 4239, public relations, community engagement materials of 5,000. Is that what we usually run? About 5,000 on that?
Actually, that expense was in DARE before, but what we did this year is used it for our Clean Car campaign to intervene with the burglaries to the motor vehicles. We passed out a probably three or 4,000 of those. Those are hang-ons, the red tags that warn motorists not to leave things in the cars and to lock their doors and things like that. In addition, we ordered a quantity of the green hang-ons to alert residents to burglaries and whatnot, and that's been part of an ongoing campaign to kind of reduce the burglaries and the burglaries to motor vehicles.
Okay.
That's another one of those that was a
Yeah.
discretionary last year that I'll move over.
Okay, and the
Sure.
question I wanted to have in general was be from the DARE program that we had in place last year to the new community involvement type of situation that's the replacement. Is there any net benefit, like cost-wise?
I don't think that we can realize a net benefit because during Nick's tenure, he did not document, and this is not, I don't want anybody to think this is a slam on Nick. It was just not something that was part of the culture at that time. He didn't document every time he was doing any one given thing. What we can realize a cost savings on is there's no overtime associated with school and community engagement this year. All of the time consumed is consumed during regular duty hours with the 9 officers who are dedicated to community engagement. So it's really difficult for us to measure because we weren't measuring the same way when Nick was a DARE officer that we do now.
I had a question regarding the printing and forms. We're requesting $1,000 increase from 4,000 to 5,000. At year-to-date, we're currently at $1,800 on that expense, account 4235.
What we anticipate is some additional flyering to go along with that. We can probably reduce it by some, but we're anticipating some flyering to go along with our crime prevention efforts for printing.
But wouldn't you,
We're only at 17 to date.
Or 1,800
18 to
year-to-date.
date.
but wouldn't you be tying that into the next line below there with the public relations, community engagement? Wouldn't that be the, kind of along the same lines?
Well, the other thing with the printing is we have to send out notices for the administrative tow cases and things like that. So, like I said, we can take a look at if we see if we can reduce
Just so you have
it
an
some.
idea of what you're actually spending on those red flyers, for example, as opposed to the notices for what you just mentioned.
What are we at year to date? 1,700?
1800.
And
Versus the 4,000
with these
budget.
additional printing, what do you expect to be at the end of the?
Probably no more than $500 or $600. So.
Or can we reduce it?
23.
Could we
Now
reduce
we're
it to
23,
If
that's
we
65
look at what
now?
we actually spent, the previous year was 1,123, so we should take a look at that, Chief, unless there's some specific
No, we can take a look.
mailing.
Right down
Bring
to
it back down to last year's number of 44,000.
Well,
Or
three.
even lower,
Well, three.
Probably 35 or 3.
lower, yeah.
We gave 2 options, so we'll take 3, right? Over 35.
We'll take 3.
Three?
3. That's fine.
So we're taking it from 45 down to 3.
5,000.
Five down to 3.
Oh, printing
Last year
and forms
was
down to 3,000. Gotcha.
Anything else in this section? 40-4243, rent and equipment, $171,903. Range fees, we've already spoken about the $5,000. Vehicle lease, the final payment for fiscal year ending 15 is $164,903. Rentals for 2,000. What's any idea what's going on with that?
Miscellaneous rentals, rental of equipment.
Gotcha. And then camera rental for Darien Fest for $1,500. That's the one that you put.
That's the two eye-in-the-sky cameras. We put one on either side of the park, and we feel that they've been very effective as a deterrent and allowing us, in the event that an incident occurs, allowing us to review it. So
Have you made any arrests from it?
No, we have not. We have not.
And
It's
last,
good.
last year
But
we
the
took
last
advantage
year-
of that, but we did not have it in the budget, is that correct?
That's correct.
Anybody got an issue with it?
I hope you don't have anybody of us getting beers in there.
That was last year. This year we'll have the new super camera, so we'll catch a little more. Chief, in terms of the vehicles, we said the vehicle lease ends in fiscal year 15, which is 164, and we don't have anything yet 16, 17, because we anticipate the fleet through the fiscal year ending 17. So again, probably the third year out.
Exactly.
We'll start looking at the replacement. We'll
For
have a
the
larger number.
for the
For the
newer vehicles, but
Yes.
we'll probably start next year looking at the replacements for
correct.
those.
I'm talking about the larger
Yes, sir.
vehicle purchase amount that was, I don't remember, 800,000 in there.
That's
so
correct.
we've got that plugged. I think one of the questions last night at the police committee meeting was asking to make sure we looked at equipment over the 3-year period, and we've done that in most cases. And here in the vehicles, it's not showing only because we won't need that larger number till fiscal year 18.
Okay. 40-4253 supplies office 7,000.
No.
Do we have a year-to-date?
$4,400 year-to-date, and we're going with a $1,000 increase.
Roll it back. Let's roll it back to the 6,000.
Sold.
I was thinking 5.
Let's just keep it at 6. Is that all right? 40-4263 training and educations. Department maintenance budget request is 34,712, and then 1325 is discretionary. That's broken down by law for police review 1 day 150, drug law review 150, IRMA special training 200, juvenile officers conference 125, miscellaneous officer 200, civilian 500. I guess the big question is the 34,712 last year, how accurate did we end up using that amount for training?
Training education, we've only used 13,000 so far this year.
12,300 out of 31,000.
One of the things that we're doing is, because the officers did so poorly on the promotional exam, I spoke to John Murphy about it, and my question is, do we have a responsibility to ensure that the officers who did poorly, especially on the day-to-day police work, do we have a responsibility to mitigate that? And so he suggested that we did, and that was my thought process. And so what we're attempting to do is, for those officers who did do poorly, is giving them some additional training. And Nemert offered some training, and it's $500 per officer. It's basically an intense review for law that number one, it provides the officers a boost, and then it shows that we've taken some proactive step to not send officers who, at least on paper, appeared not to be prepared back to the street. So.
But are we just offering this training, or is it mandated?
No, it's mandated.
It's mandated.
Yes,
and
sir.
that accounts for the increase
Yes,
in
yes,
last
sir.
year's budget and this year's budget?
Yes, sir.
Now, what about the difference between the year-to-date and the budget amount last year? Because those are not mandatory, are they?
Most of the training that you see indicated here that Alderman Shower read off is basically either mandated training that we have to do, or training that maintains proficiency. One of the lines is the certification, armorer's certification, and so it's armor certification for the carbine rifle and for the Glock pistol. And so each of our 7 range officers has to attend that class in order to be certified to work on and repair the weapons that we use.
So, Chief, you're estimating that through the end of the year there'll be another $16,000 worth of training.
May not
I mean,
be
that's-
that much. Probably.
I think that was your.
Well, that
yeah.
and then also, out of the 34,000 that we're asking for this year, how much of that is mandated?
That all of that will be mandated.
All of it.
Well, let me digress. Probably about 15,000 is going to be mandated training.
Chief, one of the items says basic law enforcement,
That's-
Suburban Law Enforcement Academy, it says reimbursable.
That's the new hire academy. That's for new hires. Half of that it's $6,000 and half of that is reimbursable.
Page 28,
Right,
Chief.
so, but
yeah.
you've got $6,000 factored in the budget, so if half of it is reimbursable, should that be reduced by 3,000?
That could be reduced by 3,000, but I don't know what the turnaround time on us getting that back is. So, but we can
Well, we
reduce it.
typically would budget that full expense, I believe, Mike, and then we would take,
Reimbursement.
yeah, and then we would take that in reimbursement in the revenue line item.
I mean,
I think from an accounting standpoint, Paul, I think that's what we end up doing. So you recognize the full expense in the budget.
I guess my point was just, I mean, I think the training's really important, obviously, but then it should be used. I mean, if we're gonna budget $35,000 for training, I don't wanna end up at the end of the year and use $16,000.
But
That's
here
ridiculous.
again, part of the reason why that training wasn't used is because we had 7 officers on the FMLA, and so we kind of put a moratorium on the training because we couldn't afford to send people to the training. So I don't
Okay.
want to lose too much of that 34/7 because we anticipate it being at full strength. And when you look at page 28, as far as the support, all of that training is training that we pretty much have to participate in. It's not like extra stuff that we're looking to do.
Does anybody have any issues with that then?
Well, two comments. One is last year it was at 28,000. And then I don't know what's the college reimbursement line item?
That is the basic law enforcement, South Suburban Law Enforcement Academy. $3,000 is the cost for each, and it's 2, and it's actually I think the cost is actually $6,000 per officer. We get it reimbursed for half, and that's why it's reflected as a cost for 3,000.
But there's a second one
About the second
on the bottom.
college reimbursement.
That's for tuition reimbursement, if I'm not mistaken.
For the officers?
For the officers.
For not law training, but more student
No, this is student training. Yes, ma'am.
Training.
Collective bargaining agreement has a provision for college
Exactly.
class reimbursement if an officer takes college classes at a local university. We would reimburse that.
Okay, have
think
some of the
half of-
officers been participating in that?
Some do. But we don't get a huge amount. A lot of the officers have families and just choose not to participate.
Do we know if any of the officers that have gotten the college reimbursement are any of the officers who failed our test? Well, I'm just asking if they got degrees and, you know.
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
I don't remember, Chief, the last one that was approved. We might, we budget that because it's in the union contract, but I don't believe we have any requests
Since I've been here,
upcoming or people letting you know, so.
since I've been here, I haven't approved that one. So.
So are we okay with the 34 still?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think so.
that's all.
Anybody have an issue or not?
Well, I mean, I guess if we use it, I don't have an issue with it. But if we're not going to use it, then I have an issue with it. Historically, do we know how much we've budgeted as compared to how much is used?
Well, we
Besides
had-
last year.
Well, it was 7 FMLA. I mean,
Right. I mean,
you
if
know.
that's what accounts for it, but if it doesn't, I haven't seen the data for prior years, but if that doesn't account for it, then, then I think we need to streamline that a little bit to account for what we're actually using, not what's available.
The previous year was lighter at 15,000.
Right. So we had was that what's budgeted, or was that?
Oh, that was the actual expenditure.
So 15, and this year we're at 13, 16.
34. Oh, for instance, I mentioned earlier the armorer. That's a every 2-year certification, so that wouldn't have been included. And then there's some other classes that aren't required, courses that aren't required every year.
Okay, and then 15 last year.
Last year, we came in at 16 versus, or projected 16 versus 20. I'm not sure what the actual came in. We budgeted 20, came in at 16 the year before.
So
Does seem like it's trending less than budget.
right. So even 2 years ago, without the FMLA, we were using less than the budgeted amount.
I like the chief's idea, though, to get more training for officers that are not
And then
doing as
again,
well.
and then again, some of the certifications or some of the certification courses don't cycle every year. So 2 years ago, we wouldn't have had the armor certification. So that's in this year. and so it most likely wouldn't have been in 2 years ago. So I think it's in every 2 year. Some of the certifications, like now we're looking to teach ASP training. It's a piece of equipment that we carry, so we have to make sure that everybody's certified in it. Taser training, the officers have to be recertified in taser training, handcuffing, things like that.
Yeah, so I mean, again, I'm not objecting to the number if it's used. If it's not used, then I have an objection with the number.
Chief, other than, I mean, the training that you have outlined in here is a specific plan for all the officers. So unless there was something, again, like 7 officers being out, you should hit that number because that.
You're correct. Actually, we reduced this number, and I don't know if everybody has this. There's page 28, but if you look on the number of officers, we cut down the number of officers to be trained in some categories.
So to your point, this amount that the chief's requesting, there's no reason that we should not
That we
use all of
shouldn't.
that training
Yeah.
unless something out of the ordinary happened again.
Exactly.
What you said, Chief, is the mandated would be 15,000 of that 34.
Roughly. Now, for instance, the NEMERT training, that's proficiency training, and so that's pretty much all 34 of the officers have to attend.
34, so,
Exactly, and it's at a cost of $90 per person. So, I would like to stand as close to as possible to this 34. This was at.
Is there any way to give it a new category, though, between mandatory and non-mandatory?
Well, when we say mandatory and in the cop world, mandatory and proficiency are kind of the same. I don't want a police officer who's carrying an ASP not to know how to use it efficiently, even though it's not necessarily mandatory. What happens is if the officer uses it without having been certified according to his use, then the city is culpable for how he used it, how he or she used it. So there's mandatory training that we have to have. Firearms training is mandatory, but there's other training that's proficiency based that in order for us to ensure that we're not liable in the event something happens, that it's done. Not only that, but you also want to make sure that the officer is proficient for his or her own safety as well. So I'd like to stay as close to this number as possible.
I think a few years back, what was our goal here, we changed from, at one point it was all in one category under maintenance, and we tried to break out some in discretionary, I think, to get to Tina's point. So we looked at the training budget, because I think one year it was probably 2008, there was a lot of training, or $5,000-$10,000 that was cut from the discretionary end. But I don't recall, Chief, if it was described as you're describing it. That might have been other types of training, but.
I'd like to see it brought down to last year's budgeted amount, since we're not anywhere near using it.
I
The
disagree.
28?
Yeah, I disagree. I think we should keep it at
28
the
sound
number.
right?
28.
Yeah, I think we should keep it at the number the chief is asking for.
Well, the previous year, he had a $20,000. 2 years ago, it was 20,000. He used 16,000, Michael?
Rounded up to
So he was
16,
like 4,000
15,800,
under that year.
15,200.
And what he's saying is he's
15,200,
mandating
I think, right?
15,000 this year
Out of
out of
35.
Out of 35, so he's basically giving himself a $20,000 budget for the proficiency type of.
right, but I mean, 2 years ago, we don't know which part of that was mandated and which part was not.
We don't. Maybe it makes sense if you're going to be retraining officers in areas that are critical per John Murphy, maybe you need to break that out and put that in something special so that you're showing that as a difference.
Again, I don't have an objection to the number. I just don't think it's being used, and I don't think it will be used. So I don't really want to budget for it.
Does anybody have an objection that we ended here and pick this discussion up for next week, and maybe we can get some more information on that?
Yeah, maybe we could do a 5-year average or something.
Yeah, if we could look
I'm
at.
sorry, what?
Like maybe we could do an average, 3 to 5 years to.
See, the problem is there's each year presents a different set of dynamics.
Sure,
Now,
that's
the-
why I
the-
want to go back
The
farther.
training budget that's outlined here is pretty much bare bones minimum based on what we have, what we're able to do right now with the 34 officers. Some of it, the Illinois Drug Enforcement Officers Conference, that's training. We want, what used to happen prior to my arrival is only the detectives went to that. Well, when Steve Reed was here, he told me, well, our detectives don't conduct narcotics enforcement. Conversely, all of our beat officers conduct narcotics enforcement. So what we at some level, and so what we did is we changed it. So now we rotate each year. We send 2 different officers to the road officers to the Illinois Drug Enforcement Officers Conference. And so that's the kind of dynamic that we're changing. If we want a more elite, well-trained department, this is the way we get to it, I think. So.
What's everybody's thoughts? I mean, seriously, do you guys wanna,
No, leave it at it as it is.
you guys wanna, or you wanna revisit it next week?
I think we revisit it next week, since there's enough
I'd like
questions
to-
out
Is
there.
Sylvia gonna be back next week?
We just summarize what those questions are, so if we go back now for the next meeting, we'll know. I mean, I heard a couple of things. You want 5-year review. I mean, what do you want us to prepare or look at to
Well,
bring back?
Personally, I would like a historic, maybe 5 years. And I understand policing is changing, but the budget's also doubled just in the last couple of years for that particular item. So I'd like to see a background of amount allocated, amount used, and then also I'd like to get maybe a firmer grasp on this number, exactly what is mandated and what is discretionary for officers to go to or not to go to.
And you might even want to break it down where the chief said there are, every 2 years you do proficiency training, you know. So what happened 2 years ago that we're now duplicating again? Those kind of things that might increase your cost, because last year we didn't do it.
Right.
Something like that would help us out more. When we do this in education, when we break it down, we'd break it down like that. Things that we had to do, mandatory training, and other things that we didn't have to do, because we didn't have the luxury of having $34,000 for training.
Well, I think it makes sense going forward too to know about how many I know there's going to be turnover and stuff possibly, but how many officers are due for that extra training, so there's more of a rhythm and a rhyme going forward too.
One of the things I like everybody to kind of consider is that being a police officer is kind of like being a doctor. A traffic stop is something that looks really simple, but the strategy on conducting a felony stop changes each year. The way a felony stop is conducted now is a lot different than it was in 1982 when I first got into policing. And so what we want is our officers to have the most updated techniques. How we attack an active shooter in a school has changed since Virginia Tech.
Absolutely.
So those things are all different. So the prevailing theory 7 years ago for an active shooter is once the police respond, everybody waits outside and then goes in and attacks the shooter. Now the prevailing wisdom is that the first 2 units on the scene go in and engage the shooter. And so those kind of things, even though they're not necessarily mandated as absolute training, those are things that we have to do in order to maintain a certain level of proficiency and readiness.
Yeah, I don't think we want to take anything of that away. I think we just want to get a better handle on, what's in front of us and what's the 2 categories.
And if it's not too much trouble, could we add on the training schedule provided for last year, where it indicates the number of officers, the cost of each, could we find out how many went to each of those particular training sessions, or would that be too much?
Actually, this current year we're in, you mean the budget?
Yeah, the
that
current
was
year,
approved?
sorry, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the budget we're in currently.
Yeah, okay.
You
Is
know,
there-
so under law, there's law for police, 2 officers at $250. How many actually went?
Chief, I know it's probably it's a week away and probably a lot of work, but is there a way of putting together some kind of plan of, taking this education and which officers you think would, over the course of the year, would utilize the monies that Alderman Cipher is discussing here today?
What happens is we kind of put it on a rotation, Alderman Kenny, because of the changing schedules. We rotate shifts. Sometimes a class will be available and it will only be available for days. And so if we have 6 officers who've already attended that, then we might not be able to send anybody for that session. So we can take a look at how to break this out. I'm not sure exactly what.
I mean, it wouldn't have to be, set in stone, but at least maybe get an idea on how you can plan and make it work.
Brian, do you have an idea of what exactly everybody's asking for?
Well, I think what we'll put together, I'm hearing the chief came with a training budget. I'm hearing the council wanting some more information and to make sure we're using the budget and how we're using it, because we ended up light a couple of years. We budgeted 30, we ended up at 15. That's certainly a reasonable question. I think we need to go back and look this year why we didn't, I think that was Alderman Seifert's question, why we didn't hit the budget this year, who went to what, and figure, and tell the council why. You know, if you're down 7 officers, certainly your training is gonna be reduced. So maybe that category, we only sent 1, whereas next year, if we're not planning to have any officers out with a full complement of 34, that would affect it. So I will put together some information. Now,
Yep.
exactly what everybody wants to hear, I'm not sure.
I know, yeah,
but I have a
I'm
pretty
hear-
good
I'm
idea of
hearing
what-
lots of things here.
Yeah, I
so.
mean, I'll tell you that I have no problems with the 34,000 if we're gonna use it. And maybe in the past, maybe training wasn't a high priority, probably maybe with the, budget cuts that we had. I don't know, but if we're gonna make a commitment to it, we make a commitment. So
No,
that's
right, but-
training has always been a key component.
Yeah, but having it available doesn't necessarily mean
Right,
anybody
and
use it.
but I mean, years ago,
So,
when we used to do police budgets years ago, we would sit here and we actually discussed, he presented to us a schedule that he actually had for all the officers, and who was gonna go at what time, and who needed certain types of training. We've had a great changeover since then, but I have no problem with 34,000 if we're gonna spend 34,000. I mean, I really don't. I'm not trying to deny that. I'd just like to know whether or not, if people are told they have to do something, then they have to do it. I wanna know why they're not doing it.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, as far as the non-mandatory training, it would be my opinion, and I could be wrong, that you're going to have the same handful of people going to the training all the time. I mean, that's generally, I think, in most professions, you have those that tend to try to improve themselves and those that not to. So, if we're authorizing 10 classes at, Law 101, you're not going to have 10 people go because there's a certain group of people that are never going to go. So why should we budget for it if it's not mandatory, or if we can't make it mandatory?
Well,
Well-
for instance, the 15 people who did not perform well on the promotional exam, those people all have to go to the basic law review.
Right. Again, I'm not questioning the mandatory programs. I think those are. I mean, that's fine. I don't
It
have an
sounds,
issue
it
with
sounds to me like the chief is, for those 15 officers, is going to make more courses mandatory for those individuals.
There
Is
were
that what I'm
several, there
hearing?
were several areas that they did not perform well in, and we want to make sure that they have the tools that they need, not just for liability purposes, but to make them better officers and to make them better able to perform.
Can we even make anything? I mean, do you have that ability with union contracts to make make training mandatory?
I think that the by virtue of the fact that they did so poorly in the
I'm saying in general. I mean, you have this schedule
yeah,
of
absolutely,
classes.
absolutely.
So you could say you could just assign people to go, and
Training,
it's a
yes,
mandatory
training is
training.
training is
So,
one
I
of
mean,
those
if it's that
areas.
essential, then I think it probably should be mandatory, not
Yes.
discretion.
Well, we're using
what
the
I'm
term
hearing.
mandatory, chief, I think as mandated by the state, but certainly the training that we're not saying mandated, the department
No,
can
we can
mandate
mandate.
officers
We
go
can
to that,
mandate
yes.
officers to attend certain training.
So I mean,
We have sexual harassment training that everybody's mandated to attend. Nobody that didn't come from the state. That's internally that we recognize that we have not had that training.
So then
So-
I guess I'm saying if the training is that important to the day-to-day changing duties of an officer, then maybe a mandatory training plan schedule for the officers is something that should be looked at. Just a suggestion. I mean,
Chief, as part of the training that we have in the budget, it's by officers in numbers. So as an example, law enforcement review 1 day for officers. I'm assuming that, I'm not assuming, but I recall that there's a spreadsheet also that shows who those 4 officers
Who those
are.
4 officers are,
So
yes.
there's some more detail in terms of the planning that went into who's going where.
Yes.
So again, if there's any reason that you vary from this, it really shouldn't happen.
Well,
once
there
you've
may
come
be
up with
reasons that
this.
vary.
But-
Like I said, if
But if there was no reasons, this would be the plan. But
exactly.
if certain things happen with the staffing levels, certain issues out in the community, that may adjust. So as an example, maybe you couldn't send the one person for that law class. But I think if we want to look at what happened this year, I think that's at least what Jorg asked us to put together. If the council's interested in seeing that, then we'll know what happened this year, why some maybe didn't go to training that we had planned for.
With the exception of the college reimbursement, is there anything else on this list that's required or put in there because it's part of the contract, the union contract? So it's just the college reimbursement.
That's the only thing.
Yeah.
That's
correct.
the only thing.
Any other questions for tonight? All right, so I think this is a good place to take a break for tonight. Our next meeting will be next Tuesday at 6:30 PM. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night.
Turning the mics off,
Nice job.
Maury.